Now that we know all about variables and different data types that we need at this point in the course, let's talk about getting user input. So we're going to get user input at the console, and we're going to read it what the user types at the keyboard. So to do that, first of all, we're going to want to prompt the user. So you should always prompt the user so they'll know what they're supposed to type. So I'm going to do a Console.Write. And I'm choosing write here instead of WriteLine for a reason, and I'll show you in just a second. And then I'm going to make up a prompt. Like so, and a colon and space, space, and there's a reason for the 2 spaces. I'll show you in just a second as well. And then let's close that off. So that is a valid prompt for the user. So when that line executes, it'll say enter first name. And the next thing we need to do is actually read what the user types. So to do that, we need to know a new method. Console.ReadLine is what we're going to use in here to read user input. So readLine is a method, just like write and WriteLine and readKey. readLine lives in the console class. So again, a class is a container that has methods that have a similar purpose. So all the console methods, they deal with doing things on the console. So when the user types something and readLine reads it, it's going to return it as a string. No matter what the user typed, it's going to be returned as a string. Even if they enter a number, it'll be treated as a string. So what I need to do over here is I'm going to have a variable, and I'm going to call it first name because I want to do something with that string that gets returned. Now, of course, it's flagging me because I haven't yet declared first name. So I'm going to do string first name like so. Now everything is good. So now I'm prompting the user. I'm reading what they enter, which gets returned as a string and placed in that string variable. Now, this is actually something newer we haven't seen before. We're doing an assignment here. So we've got the assignment operator, but we're assigning it instead of a variable or a literal, we're assigning it a method, and we can do that. Okay. Now, what we want to do is we want to see what the user types. I mean, we don't have to, but it's useful to do it. And this time I'm going to use WriteLine. I could have also used write, but WriteLine works better in this case. And I'm going to say, hi. Let's do interpolation, actually. Let's do $, double quote. And then the contents of the variable and just some punctuation to make it look cool. And that right there. Now, let's see what happens. So now it is prompting me, just like I said before. And notice that message tells the user exactly what to do. All right. And also notice the cursor flashing here. That is Console.ReadLine waiting for me to type something. So I'm going to type Jim. When I press enter, readLine is going to return a string and store it in first name. And then the Console.ReadLine down here is just going to print that back out, just like so. So what's going on here? First of all, the reason why I used write, you're normally going to use write when you're prompting for something. And the reason why is because write doesn't do a new line return like WriteLine does. When we do a WriteLine, it automatically does a new line return after the string is printed, and write does not. Well, that's good for us because that prompt, the cursor flashing up here from readLine, appears right after it appears on the same line. If we had used WriteLine, then it would have appeared on the next line, and it wouldn't look as good. It's normal to prompt somebody and have what they type appear on the same line. It's also normal to have a colon, and then you want to have these 2 spaces, so we have the 2 spaces print out here. If we didn't have those 2 spaces, then what the user types would be bunched up right against the colon, and you don't want anything bunched up against your colon, trust me. And let's see, and that's pretty much it, okay? So that's an example using a string variable. Now let's look at another example. This time I'm going to, let's mix it up and use a double. And I'm going to declare sum operand 1 and operand 2. Now, we've seen examples where I've declared them as integers, and it would work here, but I'm going to do double just in case the user types in, a floating point type value. So let's prompt the user. And just a simple message. You can make it whatever you want and do spaces and do this. Okay. Next, I'm going to read the value. So this is a very common pair. We're going to have a console write with a prompt followed by a console read line to get the input. So I'm going to say operand 1 is assigned, and this is where it gets neat. Okay, we're going to do a console.readLine to grab that input. Okay. Now the reason for the squiggly is because readLine returns a string. If we look and see the message, it says cannot implicitly convert type string to double. So that means it cannot automatically return convert the string that's returned here into a double to fit in this double variable. So what we can do is use one of the convert methods, convert to double. So there's a lot of different convert methods. So we've seen convert to int 32. Now we're going to use convert to double because we want this as a double. So what happens? Now this is something, a little bit newer as well. I've got a method being sent as an argument to another method. All right, so it goes like this. So it's like in math when you evaluate things in parentheses first. So I'm going to evaluate what's in these parentheses, these two outer parentheses first, which is the console read line. So console read line is going to sit there, wait for the user to type something. When they do, it's going to return a string. So you might imagine that console read line is replaced by a string. Just imagine it that way. And then what's going to happen next is convert to double is going to take that string and convert it into a double, as long as the user entered something that can be converted into a double. And then we're going to store it in operand 1. All right, so it might take a moment to wrap your head around that, but it's not, it's really not that bad. So I'm doing everything in a single line there. Now, let's get operand 2 here. I should have copied and pasted, but anyway, enter. I like to get my finger exercise. All right, so we prompt them again. I might want to change the message up, but just for my example here, I'm going to make the messages both the same. Now I'm going to show you an alternate method that you might see where we actually do, instead of a single line like we did up here in line 18, I'm going to use 2 lines, okay? First of all, I'm going to have to make another declaration, and it's going to have to be a string declaration. I'm going to do str, and this is going to be operand 2, like so. All right, so I prefixed this with str to distinguish this from this operand 2. Okay, so this is the string version, this is the double version. Now what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to come down here to do a console read line, but what I'm going to do is use the str version of operand 2. Okay, just like that. So console.readLine is going to read the user input as a string and put it in the string variable str operand 2. But now, because what I'm eventually going to do is do math on these. So I need to convert into a numeric type. Okay, this is why I converted to a double up here, is because I'm going to do math. And we saw in the string video that we can't do math on strings because it does string concatenation. So now the next thing I have to do in this particular example is now I can take operand 2 and assign it convert dot to double and str operand 2, like so. So this method is, in my opinion, inferior. Actually, this method is the preferred way to do it, the single line method. But this method takes 2 different lines, 2 different statements, and it also requires that I declare an extra variable. But if it helps you to understand the process, that's okay, all right? So we do a read line as a string, plug it into this string variable. Now we take our string variable and convert it into a double and put it into operand 2. I'll show you the equivalent single line version. You would just pick one of these, you wouldn't do both. So the equivalent would be operand 2 is assigned convert. Actually, let me do some copying and pasting. like so. That would be the equivalent. So you would pick one of these two. Again, the single line version is the preferred version, but either one is actually valid. Now I'm just going to cut this out and just stick with the single line version, like so. All right, now what can we do? Now we have doubles stored in operand 1 and operand 2, so I can do this. Oh, let's also take this. I don't need this anymore. All right, so I'm going to take sum and assign to it operand 1 plus operand 2. So that's going to take those two doubles, it's going to add them together and stick that value into sum. All right, so now you see how we can get user input and then do things with it. So now I can do Console.ReadLine, and maybe I'll say, let's do some interpolation here and say the sum of is sum, just like that. Now let's see what happens. So I'm going to enter the first value, and I'm just going to enter 5. Okay, 5 is, technically an integer, but a double can handle that. So we enter that. We get the second prompt, and maybe I enter 10.6. Okay, and now I hit the enter key, and we get the message. The sum of 5 and 10.6 is 15.6, just like we expected. So that's the basics of getting user input, and you can do all kinds of things with it. We've converted it into different types and print out fancy messages and whatever else. So that's pretty much it for now.